Whew, okay. All right, so I'm gonna make sure a couple things are set up right away, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, sweet. Everything's up and running. I guess I'll do a little start as to how things have been going the past 2 weeks since I did take off like last week. So last week, as I explained in yesterday's podcast, we actually, well, for those of you who didn't know, we actually fit in a music discussion podcast thanks to Alon. He generated one for this week in particular, and we decided to do it yesterday instead of doing it today. I think he thought there was going to be a schedule conflict, and then it just didn't end up happening. So he ended up getting here, or ended up just moving it to Saturday, and that was fine. That one should be uploaded and should already be distributed across the various platforms where you could find healthy dialogue content. Today, I figured I might as well just do a mix of a status update for what happened last week, and then also talk about comparing yourself today. It was something that an influencer of mine was very passionate about, or was having troubles with, because they ended up seeing themselves in different environments and didn't feel like they were enough. So that's kind of the inspiration of having this social ranking at the individual level against the environment that you're a part of. And so I suppose we'll talk about that today, or rather, that's what I wanted to talk about today. So, as in terms of last week, so some context for what I was going through to take last Sunday off. I stopped doing my primary responsibilities, mostly because my like contract was up. I had a choice to continue my internship at T-Mobile, and I ended up taking 3 weeks off instead because I felt like I needed a kind of summer break. I didn't really get one um, in accordance to school because yeah, I don't know. I just needed to keep going. So this is like the first time I've actually gotten like a decent amount of break. So I'm off for 2 weeks between when I stopped my internship last Friday and when I'm about to start school. Not this upcoming Monday, but the Monday after that, I'm going to be starting. So it's going to be the last week of September is when I'm going to be starting up a lot of my responsibilities again. But how I was feeling last Friday, I was pretty burnt out. I felt like I needed a break. I didn't have a whole lot of motivation to even keep up with what T-Mobile was asking me to do. So I was pretty much full burnt out. I decided that it was probably best if I just table my responsibilities and make up for it at a different time. Taking the break was what I was was what I needed, and I don't know. So far, I would say I'm pretty passionate as of right now. Like last week, I wasn't very passionate about doing a podcast because there was so little that I wanted to do that I didn't have a whole lot of passion ideas to be talking about here. I got some inspiration on Wednesday, but by that time, Alon had already put out the music discussion podcast, so I figured I might as well just wait until after that and then get that outline out for today's work. So, and since we missed last week, I'm just making it up with this one as well. I don't know if anyone else is going to be joining today. I did give a pretty short notice with the outline about what we're going to be talking about, but maybe we can have a follow up discussion. Maybe next week if the other guys decide to listen in on what I have to say for this time. Um, okay. Any other news revolving me? I don't think so. I think we should be good with generating content from here on out. We'll see how my workload ends up being because I'm gonna have a bunch of responsibilities come 2 weeks from now. So I'm gonna be doing an extension of my internship at T-Mobile, and I'm also gonna be doing full time school. So that all mixed together might put me at a pretty awful well, it's not a headspace, but like my creativity is going to be drained, like so drained that I won't be able to generate content for this. But we'll see if the other guys end up coming around. I know they have a lot to talk about, and actually when I did talk with some of them, it sounded like they they were more hesitant to openly share their thoughts more so than I am. That's like the comparison that I've drawn between myself and other people. And I get that feeling too. Like there's some times where I just don't feel like like I should bless the world with the perspectives that I have. And to some degree it does kind of feel that way. It's like I know more, like, well, okay, I know as much as anyone else that perspective is very helpful when generating ideas for yourself, drawing inspiration, coming to new understanding. So why would you give that away for free, or why would you bless other people with that with your own perspective, which could potentially help other people? And that's up to them and how they want to monetize or um, put a value to what their own perspective is. But um, I as of right now, I'm very happy with how I'm distributing it over this podcast and over different platforms. I don't actually, surprisingly, I don't actually use a whole lot of platforms for my own personal stuff. For the longest time, I was like, my existence shouldn't really matter to anyone else. And to this day, I don't think it really does either. There's a select few who find my existence like pleasant, so pleasant that they want to be with me all the time, or rather, they're like happy that I'm with them in the select times that we get to be together. Um, and that goes for most of my close friends, and then just some acquaintances every once in a while, past friends, I would say. And there's a couple new friends too. But yeah, that list is pretty small in comparison to how other people are, which is it. I mean, we could go into the idea and explore a little bit of how other people have like hundreds of friends and the meaning that they get out of those relationships with those people. I've been meaning to talk about that as well. It's just it's a thought that I have reoccurringly because I do a comparison between, well, I guess that is fitting to today's topic. I compare myself in the metrics of the friends that I have versus the friends that other people have. And then you have to do the comparison of the quality of how my friends interact with me versus how someone else's friends who are in the quantity of hundreds, what the quality is of those interactions to that person. Anyways, we won't have that discussion today. Well, I guess it will. We might talk about it. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. My outline is pretty vague for the most part, so any direction that I want to go, I could totally go. And maybe some. I think I even missed out a couple points that I wanted to talk about, but I'll mention those in the future. Anyways, today we're gonna be talking about like social ranking and status, and as I said before, someone else, an inspiration character of mine, an actual real life person, was having problems with how they were viewing themselves. Like they thought they were bad at a specific thing. And there was measurements for saying the opposite of what they were claiming. So they said they were bad at video games, but in reality, across various different games, their ranking is in the top 2%, which is hard. It's hard to say that those, I don't know. It's very hard when you're in the competitive mindset and you're always playing against people of your rank, or you're always in a competition with those kinds of people, it's hard to understand how you actually fit across the rest of the competition that you have. So even though you're competing with the top 2% all the time, you're not actually bad at what you do, even if you can't keep up with the competition that is actual competition to you, because the other 98% is pretty much obsolete in how you view the game. And so that's what's drawing the inspiration of this social ranking status to begin with. So I guess we'll talk about first why, or like what is social ranking and what does it do? So I think from a human evolution standpoint, your brain naturally orients the information, the various points of interest of information in the environment around you to figure out where you place, or like what is a danger and what isn't. And I think there's also a social evaluation of the environment around you as well. So you have different metrics that your person draws from to pick on specific information about how you place in the world. And that gives you an idea as what is a threat and what isn't. How well are you doing? Do do you need to make impact on your environment so that you can change to be in a better position? And I think you're always in that constant evaluation as you're going through different, well, actually in the ever changing environments, really, because there's different variables that manipulate the environment around you. And I think that's happening at the nanosecond level. So it's a constant cycle of trying to understand how you are in the world. And I think that comes from a human, well, actually, that should be pretty much every living being's environment has like some sense as to how that is going. Okay. So my next bullet point is the importance of comparing yourself. So I think from the evolutionary standpoint, that's definitely the case. You need to have, well, most of it is like a safety feature for humanity, but also it's hmm. No, yeah, yeah, from an evolutionary standpoint, I think it's more of like a safety feature to keep yourself from harm. But in terms of like today's modern society, you need to make sure that the people around you aren't unknown threats and aren't known threats, so that you can manipulate yourself away from an environment or change the environment if you can. So say if you see like some sketchy person out on the street, however your mind generates that threat to begin with, you make the comparison between the culture that you represent and the ideals that you represent, and you make a comparison to what you see this force for this threat out on the street, or that you perceive as a threat out on the street. Do you call the police? Do you walk away? Do you engage this person? It's like there's a whole lot of various actions that you can take off of that perception alone. And you're making that comparison because you want to keep yourself away from any threats, or to, I don't know, do whatever's in your best interest. You can also take that to different levels as well. So, I mean, in this capitalistic society, you get to compete with the various other competitors who see a gap in the market that want to take this opportunity and bring it forward to make profit over it. I have to pull up my markdown file. I'm so sorry. I'm getting distracted by looking at Discord for some reason. Anyways, So yeah. So there's like the whole capitalistic market or the capitalistic society that we live in. You get to compete at a local level, you get to compete at a national level, a global level. You have a service that could be recognized at the different levels that a society has, or even all of humanity in this specific time in history. And so there's different metrics that allow you to put yourself up or to analyze what competition is the right competition for you to understand whether or not you can move forward or what next steps you can take. So if you're starting a business and say it's like I don't know, say you want to make the new Amazon. And Amazon's a global business essentially. And what they do extremely well at the various dimensions for success, marketing success, and customer satisfaction and service. Like there's so many dimensions that they're super good at, and nobody else is even able to well, I mean there are other competitors out there, but my god, like Amazon has such a reputation that it's going to be very hard to take down or overtake with a different company. And so someone else is going to have to find a better solution than what Amazon has put in place to even sustain longer than them and to also provide better service than them to be the next Amazon, next first choice Amazon. And but if you're starting out a company, there's no way that you're going to be able to compare yourself to something of that grand scale. So if you want to be a distributor as well as like a online web hosting as well as a shipping, whatever, like you have to build yourself up from a specific spot and then work your way up to be whatever you want to be. But having that comparison could either inspire you to do more than what you want to do, or it could deter you from the idea altogether. So I think there's plenty of ways to take. Well, I mean, the two examples that I can put forth when it comes to Amazon, you're trying to build a company. You know that Amazon's out there, and you think that you have a better service than Amazon. So you start up this company and you make the comparison. One conclusion you could draw to is Amazon's so far ahead that I don't even have a chance because my value that my company is going to build is not going to be so much greater that it's going to overtake Amazon's reputation, long-lasting reputation to be at the forefront. Or you could say we may not have, when we're making these comparison factors, we believe that our company is going to provide more value to customers and it's going to be overall just better in reputation. It can build up to a reputation higher than what Amazon has already built up. And we think we can overtake the market on that sense. Which there's like that's a pretty ballsy thing to say when you're at the bottom, when you're starting a company to begin with. I think you have to build your way up so that you can understand where your place in the market is. Because you're always making these comparisons at different levels with different companies, trying to figure out what your market worth is and how much is it better than another company, how much is your reputation better than another company. There's so many factors that you need to keep comparing yourself to, and all that just plays into the different kinds of success that you see yourself going and the kinds of decisions that you make for the company and or yourself. If we're talking about like the individual level, the importance of comparing yourself is understanding what is going to be worth your time. Because say if you want to okay, let's say I want to be an astronaut. I know there's plenty of other people who are smarter than me, who are more capable at being an astronaut than me. But let's say out of 100 people, they took a test to figure out who would be the best, or like the top ranking astronaut skills out of 100 people. And this is just like a random selection. So let's say I placed, I don't know, 40. 40 out of 100. Where should I be taking that information about the dream to become an astronaut? Do I shelf the idea altogether, knowing that my skill isn't needed for what the market is demanding? Because the market is demanding only the top, like, I don't know, top 1% of candidates who are able to be an astronaut. Should I deter myself away from the idea because I don't have the capacity like other people can, like the other 39 candidates can, and find like a different passion that might be more suitable for what the market is demanding of me? What should I also say about me not being able to fulfill the dreams of becoming an astronaut? If the market is telling me that out of the comparisons of the population pool, I do not fit the needs, I do not fit the wants of the market for what is demanded from an astronaut. So you need to kind of humble yourself with that information, because clearly you're not the best fit based on the pool of candidates that were there, especially when it's not even a specialized pool. If you place in the top 40 of just a whole, like a random 100 candidates. And I suppose it really did, I don't know, depending on what information you pick up from the various metrics available, you make a conclusion based on what that information says about you and what opportunities are available to you. So, I suppose I'll go into. Here's a weird thought, and I didn't think I was going to share this podcast, but it was iconic at the time. It was iconic because it showed who my character was way back when I was like super young. So I would say most of my life I've been understanding the various metrics that the world provides you, and I was very humble to many different things, and that often led me to the point of like depressing moods and whatnot. So, but even back in fifth grade, they had they had a question, or like, I don't know, you were supposed to have a note card, write like a couple things down that you were really good at, and everyone, we just like all the whole class just wrote down their things, and then I wrote down my things too, and we did a round table of the different talents that people had. And when it got to me, I was like, soccer, I was good at soccer and math, and I started crying because I knew, I felt like I was lying saying that I was good at those things, because I knew I wasn't. They were things that I was like statistically okay at, but I had some humbling voice that told me I only placed within the top like 70% of all kinds of soccer players, or like out of everyone, who's even people who haven't played soccer at all. I had a understanding that there were people better than me at soccer, and that voice really humbled me down and made me start crying. Like, I was trying to word out that my ranking would be like a C in like a grade score. It was very like horribly put, but like that was like, well, I mean, you know how fifth graders talk. They can't even mumble coherent sentences most of the time. So like take understand that what I was trying to say was not coming out very well. So my teacher was probably like, "What the fuck is this kid talking about?" It was pretty funny. It was a fun moment. Not actually, because we had a talk with with my parents over like self-esteem issues. but but yeah, it didn't seem to me that other people had that humbling voice in their head by that time. And I think I've always had that. It's like I'm not that good at everything that I do, even though I'm being praised for having different talents throughout like my educational experiences. And so yeah, I think having that humbling voice has always been with me. And I've just had to learn to live with it. After that like iconic fifth grade moment, I think things have been on the uphill because I've had new challenges to encounter, and therefore I've always been optimistic about encountering new challenges. But back when like fourth and fifth grade, I had barely any challenges for myself. Most of the things that I was challenged, or like most of the things that I was scoring poorly at, I didn't even find challenging. Like it was more so boring. Um, and maybe that's a disservice to the actual intellectual capacity that I had, because maybe it was lower than what I remember it being. But I don't know. Anyways, the way that I took that information back then was a humbling perspective. But I also think they were right to believe that a child should not be so humbled by the information around them. Either that's an indicator that I was very realistic about what I was thinking, and I took it in a depressive direction, which I think is, well, I mean, should a kid do that when they're in fifth grade? When they're 10 years, well, what year was I? I was like 11 years old. Should an 11-year-old kid have that kind of realistic perspective? Depends on where they take it. I think even though I might have experienced that really early because I make these comparisons all the time, does that mean that I was being set up for failure for having that kind of perspective? I was going to deal with that problem my entire life. And actually, I have, because that's how my depression come college came around as well. It's like you make those comparisons to other people and what the various information that you're gaining from different perspectives. You have to understand your place. Now you compare to the things that you want to focus on. I was trying to be a software engineer, and a teacher like straight up told me like what you did with this assignment was so stupid. And I was like, holy shit, I'm so unfit to be a software developer. And that's what I heard instead. And I'm pretty much blowing out of proportion a lot of the information that has been conveyed to me, because that it him telling me that I was unfit to be a software developer is not what he said. That's just how I took it. What he objectively told me was much different than how I perceived that information. And so, what I've learned over the years is you need to be very accurate with how you take in this information. And very much like the inspiration that I have, or the inspiration person that was in my life, um, over the past, like for like 8 months straight. And when they said they didn't feel like they were good enough in the games that they wanted to be like overly competent in and competitive in, I I mean, I brought up the perspective that they were in the top 2% of all competitive gamers across various types of games. And I think they took that to heart. Is the understanding that in a room full of 100 people, and even though you feel like shit being in the top 2 mostly, most of the time, like almost all the time, you still beat 98 other people. And so, you know, understanding the signals that are being brought onto you, what you perceive is much different from what is the objective truth about what's being said about you. And you can't dismiss the objective truth. And what's really bad is when you use the perceived truth to say something negative about your character. And when you twist that into a way that you can't, that makes it impossible for you to climb out of. Because whatever you perceive can be very damaging to you, even though you can, I mean, you can't be wrong in saying that you still have like one other person beating you in competitive games all the time, but you're also dismissing the fact that you beat 98 other players in the pool. And that's like that's a that's a whole lot. That's 98% that you beat, and you're still upset that you're mad. You're still mad that you're getting beat by the top 1%. I mean, rightfully so, and maybe that's what matters to you. But you need to make sure that whatever you're arguing yourself against of being like a bad player, even though you're in the top two, you still need to understand that you beat the 98 other people and then still come to that conclusion. You can't just dismiss part of the the objective information to come to a conclusion. Okay, so there's also different other comparisons that you can make, just like some random facts that are out there in the world. So, and this gets into like some touchy topics as well. So, but we'll talk about those anyways. So there's various metrics for the different IQ of various ethnic groups or various identity groups. And one is going to show that on average this identity group is going to be has a higher IQ than a different identity group. And people take a look at that and justify discrimination off of which one has the better IQ score, which ethnic group has the better IQ score. And historically that's been accurate. That it has influenced the market for opportunities in different for like different professions. So say if you belong to a certain identity group that has a lower IQ, the inclination would be that an employer would take a look at that ethnic identity information about IQ and make some influenced decision on your employability. So using this kind of information that's being drawn people have used it for discrimination in the past. Ethically, is that right? I don't know. Personally, I think people are free to choose to use information the way they want to. But in the end, the market is going to show what's right and what isn't. If there's a better solution out there from the current implementation that a business is doing their business, then the market will shift over to the better business and will out-sustain the one that's suboptimal. And I think discrimination is a suboptimal tactic. And that's why I have a lot of faith that discrimination is probably going to get ruled out. Because it's going to be obsolete in terms of its marketability. It's going to get weeded out. But is it justifiable? Maybe. I think the justification leads to the way that you take in information can be you can either use it for confirmation bias. So if you're looking for different instances that prove the metrics that are being shown to you, that could weaponize the metric that you use to prove a narrative that would have you above someone else, or that would place you above someone else based on their ethnic identity. is it justifiable to use this information against yourself? So say if you're an ethnic identity and you have this expectation that on average you're supposed to be representing this group identity with this IQ at this kind of IQ level for your own self. If you don't meet that standard, if you don't meet that average, is your life worth living? That's like a complete jump, and that's like a very bad way to put it. But I would say that's how some people think. They make that irrational jump. I think the more rational jump would be is like, am I am I gonna be disowned from the ethnic identity if I have like this low IQ over the group average? Like what is my worth as a human with this group identity if I'm ill representing the group itself? And overall, I don't think like I'm so I know people think like this because I used to think like that. And I know other people do as well because they openly speak about how they like view this information and make these comparisons themselves. And the only remedy that I have to say about that, because I used to be in that spot too, and I'd say used to, even though I completely still deal with this problem all the time as well. It's like the group identity is second to you, and honestly, the group identity shouldn't even be in the fact. It shouldn't even be like a representation of who you are as an individual. You as an individual is so unique in a 1 in 8 billion statistic of the living instances of humanity today. And that's not even to say across the whole lifespan or the whole species span of humanity itself. Like, you are so rare of an instance of a human. You've developed so differently from everyone else. You should take pride in who you are, regardless of how your metrics stand up to the various identities that you want to take, the various labels that you have. It's like, don't compare yourself to the group identity. Compare yourself to who you want to be and where you want to stand. And when the information doesn't put you in the place where you want to be, like the astronaut instance, you need to find a better solution. And that's the only thing that you can do. This shouldn't be a negative. All the information surrounding you about the environment should not be. You need to find a way to make it inspirational, even when it's sometimes depressing. For example, you take on these environmental information about what's happening in Afghanistan, the terrorist groups, and you hear about these horrific acts of rape, of on site killing, like executions. You, in like Western culture, that's like, you would think that that kind of humanity existed ages ago, and that this is like the new era of where that kind of creative destruction is over. Like, that should no longer be a problem anymore. If you're so clung to your humanity, you wouldn't even think about doing something like that. And when you're introduced to that kind of information, it's shocking. But how do you take that? Do you live life differently knowing that humanity over in a different environment is much worse? I mean, to some degree, it's the same environment because, I mean, one world is still the environment, the same abstract level of environment as in the dimension of time as in your local environment. is life worth living still if you know that like humanity at its worst could cripple you if you ever involve yourself in that environment? I don't know. Because it's something that I've been questioning as well. Okay. So we got about like one more thing, like two more bullet points that I still want to hit, and then I think we'll call it a day for today. Okay, so the last two, the first one being what categories should be important to the individual. And I think everyone takes their own passions for the different metrics that are available to them. So say if you want to excel at math, which I did, um, I would be taking a look at how I compare myself to other people in math. And a lot of the comparison techniques are like how well do I place on the objective test. So like there was a Washington State specific test that had like a math component. Well, actually it had like, the normal standardized testing subjects. um, I didn't care about the other two. I only cared about math because, oh my god, I hated reading and writing. I was like, I the way that I placed was just didn't matter to me. And this ties in with the exact bullet points. Like, I only cared about math because I knew I was really good at it. So I took some level of investment to be competent in math in the way that I wanted to be competent in math. I tried to rise up to the potential of the talent that I had already and push that even more forward. So that category was important to me. And I would try to push away the other metrics of my incompetent areas, subject areas. Am I justified for doing that? I think humans are mostly alike. And the way that you develop your individuality is understanding your talents and letting go of your insufficiencies because someone else, as a collection of humanity, where you excel is where you are highlighted. If you're a good actor, you're a good actor. Regardless if your math ability is trash. You're highlighted for your great abilities and not for your incompetent ones. Well, I mean, sometimes you're incompetent ones. I mean, some people want to prove that your incompetencies make you less of a human being than what you actually are. And you see that in politics sometimes. Like, you see people trashing on Trump, but also trying to raise him up to be, some great president. It's like you get an unhealthy balance of how other people perceive your character based on how they evaluate what is praiseworthy and what is damning. But I suppose what really matters is how you view yourself. And that's what gives you the motivation to continue living meaningfully. You know what? I really like the direction I took with that. I'm gonna move on to the other one though. What categories should be important to everyone? I don't really know if there's a common collection of categories that you should be comparing yourself like that everyone compares themselves with. Because I don't think there's any one category that I can think of at the moment that everyone has on their mind. Maybe like their living situation, their living status, like whether they're alive or not. They're making the comparison if they're alive. I mean, to some people that's more of a important comparison than others, but I mean, I guess at some point in time, everyone has to overlap with the different categories. Different categories will be more prevalent in different stages of your life. So, that's interesting. maybe I should just leave it at that. The categories that are important to everyone is impossible because your group of categories that you're paying attention to are always changing based on your interests, based on what is interesting to you. So therefore, that's out of the question. The only way that you can have categories to begin with is if you're living. So that kind of disproves the first thought of the status of living being a category that's important. Because I guess it's important, but maybe you just don't think about it. Maybe it's like so fundamental that you just gloss over that as a category. I don't know. I'm getting kind of offhand with that. Anyways, I think I'm going to call it there. I'm actually okay with how this one went. I think I went into an anecdotal phase, or like an anecdotal portion that I wasn't expecting, but I think it really helped the way I wanted to talk about today's topic. Yeah. Okay. You know what? I'm going to call it there. Thank you guys for listening in. I know on some of the metrics on Anchor I was taking a look at. I totally said I was going to quit out this podcast. I'm not actually going to. Anyways, so one piece of information that I wanted to share about how like the podcast is doing overall. So I saw that there was 7 plays of the Healthy Gamer review, video review, and I wasn't too sure how to credit that. I didn't know if people from Healthy Gamer, the brand, was looking into the podcast, trying to figure out if there was like copyright issues. And the way that I conducted the podcast, there shouldn't have been any at all. And maybe it might have been like misinformation on how Dr. K set out his perspectives. But I tried to make it very clear that my perspective was was like an overlap. It wasn't even an overlap. It was like an extra layer over his perspective. And so therefore I wasn't speaking on behalf of Dr. K. I was speaking to how I interpreted his perspective. And so it goes back to the complexities of communication, which it really is. Like there's so many gaps involved there. And I don't know. That was something that caught my eye when I was looking at the podcast metrics and how things were going. So I don't know if I'll do another one of those in a little bit. Maybe I'll do like I was thinking about doing like a Jordan Peterson review. Like there's different quotes from him all the time, different ideas being thrown around. Even some today were kind of inspired by him. Like the facts are all around you, and the ones that keep you awake are the ones that are meaningful to you. the ones that you actually want to listen to, the ones that are interesting to you. So that idea pretty much came from one of excerpt of his content. But yeah, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna shut up. Like actually this time. Okay, thank you guys for listening in. I'll see you guys next week.